It's time for another edition of Dome and Domer.
Hello again, Irish fans. Welcome back to Dome and Domer, the oldest Notre Dame sports podcast on the planet. I'm your host, Mike Sullivan from the class of 1990. And joining me today, Mike Brammer from the class of 90, Eddie Jordanic from the class of 89. We're going to continue to talk about the terrible decision by the College Football Playoff Committee. We'll talk about Notre Dame's decision on the bowl game and kick around. Pete Bavacca was on Dan Patrick today, so a lot of news out there. Kenny Minchie decides to hit the transfer portal, not terribly surprising. So we got a lot to talk about. And let's get back into the conversation, coming from the playoff committee. As we talked about, last week, I think they were playing chess, right? Last Tuesday, they're moving Alabama and Notre Dame to 9 and 10 respectively in anticipation of potential moves they would have to make on Sunday. One move is, what do we do with Alabama if they lose? Hey, I said it. We talked about it. A lot of people thought you move them to 9, so if they lose, they can drop to 10. That obviously wasn't what the thinking was there. The other scenario was you move Alabama to 9, Notre Dame to 10, so that if Duke somehow wins the ACC, you can easily swap Notre Dame and Miami and make Miami the ACC representative as an at-large. That is what happened. And I think that was definitely part of the motivation of why they did that. But it is just mind-boggling to say Alabama just doesn't get punished. So 24 hours later, Bram, we'll start with you today. Things gotten any easier as you try to make sense of this?
No, I don't think so. I think what everybody's pointing out is the frustration with what was going on with the previous 6 weeks. Like, where was the rankings and what impact did that have? It's like they took all that and tossed it out the window and said, all right, we're now down to brass tacks. Now what do we do? And supposedly went into 2:30 into the morning arguing about this. That's what I think would be fascinating to find out how those conversations went, because unfortunately the committee just was not consistent. They weren't consistent from week 1 of the original rankings all the way down. Their inconsistency was Notre Dame. And that's the issue at hand, and that's why this is such a big, huge topic. And I think that's where the frustration is. It would have been I think, in my mind, personally, if there was no rankings, if there just was one and it was only Sunday, I think we're in. I honestly think we're in, because I think they say to themselves, Notre Dame could literally win the national championship this year. I don't think they could have last year. And I think that's where we're at as Notre Dame fans. That's why this is so tough to take, is I think this team has a better chance of winning it than last year's team.
Okay, yeah, a lot to untangle there. Eddie, the day after, any additional insights from you? You always seem surprised when I throw it to you.
Yeah, I know, because there's so much to say but it's all been said. I think probably that, like Bram touched on, the thing that is so disheartening is that we come from from an era of polls where teams just did not lose they did not drop when they won, and rarely did they drop if they didn't play. So in other words, the history of the USA Today coaches poll, the history of the AP poll, the history of the UPI going back that far is, again, a flawed system, but teams were not penalized for winning or not playing. So I think we are sort of hardwired to look at these rankings when they first came out, however many weeks ago, similarly. In other words, that that was a starting point, kind of like a preseason poll. And if you were going to win, you weren't going to drop if you won, whether you beat Stanford or you beat Cal or you beat Penn State or you beat Ohio State. or you, and if you lost, you should expect to drop, whether you lost to Ohio State or Penn State or Cal or Army or, a MAC school. Then it would be a matter of degrees. But basically, teams moved up and down based on winning and losing. So I think we're all sort of hardwired in that respect. And this is a very, very different process. It's like throw the 52 cards up in the air every week and sort of see where they fall based on the latest information that you have in your head. And to me, I hate committees. I always hate committees. I start getting, when Mark D'Antonio, like big fan of the Irish, some of these other people on this committee, and you're just sort of like, oh my gosh. And the conspiracy theories start, the conflict of interest start, the ESPN contract with the SEC and with all that stuff is so discouraging because you want it to be a merit-based system. And you don't walk away 24 hours later feeling that it was merit-based. And you also, know that who would you rather watch play football a couple of weeks from now? Tulane and James Madison, or Jeremiah Love, Arch Manning, and Diego Pavia?
Well, agreed. But again, there's nothing you could do about that. And I'm not going to sit here and complain about what happened Sunday because the system that was agreed to 3 years ago was put into play. I mean, you can't do anything about the fact that Tulane, that was that. It's Alabama, right? That's where it really, the inconsistency and the perceived biases, that's where it lives. Not in the fact that Tulane and James Madison made it. Hey, we all agree.
Yeah, it's a frustrating point, but but I might even argue it's Alabama and Oklahoma, to be honest with you.
I wouldn't argue with you about that either.
I just think that when you look at college football right now, to say that Notre Dame is not in that 12 is just ridiculous. From an eye test, just anybody that's a college football fans. I mean, I know we are a little bit more avid than your average, but the reality of the matter is anybody watching and all I can say is I've seen Oklahoma twice full. Most of the teams in the top 10, I've seen them play at least 2 full football games, except for BYU. And I saw 1 full football game, and that was enough for me. but anyways, you just can't look at that and say, yeah, you know what? I don't think Notre Dame isn't worthy of the top 12 anyway. They lost to Miami in the first game of the season. I mean,
right. Again, back to your point about the inconsistencies, Alabama had the best single win. Okay, so we decided that's who Alabama is. You know who Alabama is? Alabama is a team that get beat by multiple scores to a bad Florida State team, barely won to a bad Auburn team, just crapped all over themselves against Oklahoma at home to lose an important game and got the doors blown off of them by Georgia. That's who Alabama is, not the one game, right? And the inconsistency about what they decide is the most important thing. It just fits the narrative that they already had. Got to have Alabama in, got to have 5 SEC teams in. I think Notre Dame
was there a team in the playoff that had a worse loss than Alabama?
No. The team that had the next worst losses? Probably Miami. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're not going to get any favors from the committee, all the biases you talked about. As the independent status, people just cannot get over that. We're an existential threat. A strong championship caliber Notre Dame program is an existential threat to the system they've created. Because if we win the national championship or compete for it again as an independent, why wouldn't Texas do that? Why wouldn't USC do that? Why wouldn't Michigan do that? Right. There's a handful of blue blood brands that can do it also. And we all know, because we're old farts, in 1989 and 1993, independents ruled college football, right?
Right.
Florida State, Miami, Notre Dame, Penn State, West Virginia, Pitt, Okay, that just off the top of my head, those were independents
Sure.
competing for the national championship in that era. So other teams would do it as well. So we've become a threat to the system and the status quo that they've created. And we're not
Well, I
going to
think
get any help from anybody.
Yeah, ESPN's not helping themselves either with their talking heads. Notre Dame, you created the situation. You took $20 million last year. You're in the boat you're in because of that. It's just like, what does it have to do with the best football teams playing in the playoffs this year? What does that got to do with anything? What are you bringing that up for? What is that? It just goes to show the lack of credibility with pure analysis of who are the best teams and are they in the playoffs this year. And it's real obvious that Notre Dame got squeezed out. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Nobody wants to play them. You think Oklahoma took a sigh of relief after Notre Dame got bounced? Yeah, I do. I think they did. It's the last thing they wanted to do is face us.
Why would the head of the committee instruct the committee members to watch Notre Dame play Miami again in its entirety from week one if he did not have an agenda?
Right.
Completely agree. That they gave up the secret there, right? That's the game right there.
Right.
So many other games
what,
did you watch?
Right. Why not watch Florida State, Alabama? Watch that one again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Watch Alabama, Auburn. You know, watch Alabama, Georgia that just happened 3 hours ago. Like watch.
Right.
There's a whole. You know, watch Notre Dame, Texas A&M, and watch Heinisch get dragged to the ground on the last play of the game. I mean, you could extend this out, but I know what you're saying. Alabama is the key here. When you have, you know, the Feinbaums of the world, you know, yelling about this year after year, week after week, day after day on their platforms, you know, and you have their godfather, you know, on College Game Day every Saturday, there's an impact there.
What cracks me up is that they spent 2 weeks doing that.
Yes.
Furby and the rest of them, right?
Oh,
and then after the decision comes out, then they're like, "Oh my God!" Now they talk about the injustice of Notre Dame being left out.
Oh,
you guys,
you should have heard Danny Cannell today. You know, you should have heard some of these guys. You know, all of a sudden, oh, you know, they had Joe Theismann on as a guest this morning. Oh, Joe, we agree. You know, this was terrible. Notre Dame should be in the playoff. Right. Oh my gosh, if you would have heard these guys the last 3 weeks in the morning,
right?
It's a joke.
Yeah. Now, again, you know, why go back? What's the agenda? The agenda is, great, we've got to have an ACC team in there. And what do we do if Duke loses? That, you will not be able to convince me that's not the conversation that was had. There was no scenario under which the ACC is going to get left out. And so once that became a possibility, they had to deal with it. And they dealt with it by flipping Alabama and Notre Dame because there was no reason on the field to do it.
Absolutely.
You know, this whole idea of Notre Dame gets special treatment, you know, people don't understand. We'd make more money as a member of a conference and have an easier path.
Yes.
So, again, let's explain the special treatment piece of it. Well, you don't have to play your way in. Oh, really? So Oregon played their way in, right? Is that what you're telling me? Miami played their way in? I mean, on and on and on. You can go down the list. The disadvantage, the bias, it's us against the world, right? And the bias against us is a disadvantage to being an independent. And the money, hey, say, take Vanderbilt, take Texas. Are they getting a payday this year from the college football playoff? Yeah.
Yes.
Are we? No. The only way we get paid is to make it. All these other schools get revenue whether they make it or not. And I think the SEC, rightfully so, gives a bigger share to the actual representatives. I'm pretty sure the Big Ten has an equal distribution. So Michigan's at home getting paid, but we've got the the special advantage. It's all or nothing for us.
Sure.
Yeah,
I think that last year's performance, where we beat Georgia, getting back to that existential threat. Mike made the point about where we pull our recruits from, how we've sort of seemed to have gotten a really good handle on this NIL portal era. All these things have them sort of thinking like, what the hell? We liked it better when they had a lucky year once in a while and got 42-14 by Alabama. That was a lot more comfortable for us. Then
Yep.
we could roll out the arguments and the conference stuff and all that other nonsense. But this is different, and they don't like what we built. And this was a way to cut us off before we got rolling.
Another perceived advantage we have as an independent is people talk about strength of schedule. You don't have to play a conference schedule. And again, I said this yesterday, I'll say it again. We played 10 Power 4 teams this year. Members of the Power 4 didn't do that. We did. So the assumed, your schedule and perceived strength of schedule is buoyed by membership in the conference. Texas A&M automatically gets credit because they're the SEC, but they didn't play the good teams in the SEC, but they played a, quote, SEC conference, and they have an assumed strength of schedule, right? Everybody assumes that schedule is going to be tougher than Notre Dame's. IU hasn't played anybody, but they played one tough game a year in the Big Ten. And listen, I think IU's outstanding. I really do. But they haven't played that tough a competition in the Big Ten the last 2 years. So what did they do? They smoked everybody that was on their schedule, and that's all you can ask a team to do, right?
Did anybody besides us play? Did any non-SEC teams besides us play 2 SEC teams on their schedule?
Yeah, I'm sure the answer is no. Yeah,
right. We played A&M and Arkansas.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of any. Certainly, no teams in the Big Ten, the ACC, or the Big 12 played 2 SEC teams. Guaranteed.
Right. We played no FCS schools. Can anybody? Who else says that? Very few. There's always, SC for a long time hadn't played any FCS schools. We have, of course, we played the one against Tennessee State, but they're all playing FCFs. Our 2 non-Power 4, Boise State, a conference champ, Navy, who finished tied for first in their conference, but lost the tiebreaker. And again, Navy beat Oklahoma. I think they're in the SEC, right? Check me on that. Navy beat Oklahoma in a bowl game last year. So, I mean, it's just nonsensical.
And,
all right, so
we're going to go through this again next year. The schedule, you can make the argument, looks worse on paper next year. Wisconsin kind of replaces Boise.
Wait a minute. You can't equate Wisconsin and Boise.
What do you mean?
A Big Ten school. I get Wisconsin's in a down spell. I get that, but a Big Ten school versus a Mountain West school, I'm not sure that's a 1-for-1. I wouldn't make that comparison. That's all.
I don't know. I'm just saying. I think you could make the argument that that the Boise program's in better state than the Wisconsin program right now.
Okay, I'll give you that one.
Okay, so and then we play Miami and Southern Cal in November. So that's really it.
Is the SC game, is that set? I have not seen that official anywhere.
I don't think it's 100%, right?
I had heard that it's set, but it might be in Vegas.
I heard, and that's exactly what I assumed. I had heard it was a neutral site. I assumed it was Vegas, and that would be late in the year. Okay, interesting.
Yeah. So my only point is that it's pretty clear that we have to run the table next year.
Well, did you hear Bavacqua on Dan Patrick today?
Yes.
So there's a memo of understanding that says if Notre Dame's in the top 12, we are in, and that's in even next year.
All you're doing is moving the goalposts. So
yeah,
what? So then you don't rank Notre Dame where they should be ranked at 12th. Oh well, they're 14th best in the country. Sorry, fellas.
Could be.
It's just more of the same.
I mean, I'm not going to put a lot of trust in a memo of understanding with these. I mean, I think Digger O'Brien had the best line, which was, "This is what this is what happens when you put a bunch of gym teachers making 7 figures in a room together to make these decisions." I mean, that's what these guys are. These are glorified gym teachers, these ADs and these coaches from these places.
There's a number of former head football coaches and NFL players who I would give the benefit of the doubt to understanding who's a good football team and who's not, way more than anybody in the media or anybody on this call. So the ADs, whatever, they're probably politicians. there's some football people in the room, and so I can't go all the way down the road with you on that one.
I think football people have more biases than athletic directors. Football people don't have to cut deals and glad hand and politic, and that's what made the ACC's reaction to all this so baffling to me. Like, you're the commissioner of the ACC, and you're letting your social media staff and some of your people put out some of this stuff with one of your, like Babakwa said, one of your main business partners. I mean, that just kind of blew me away.
Well,
but I
well,
think
the guy,
the football people are the ones with the real biases, because they either hated Notre Dame from the beginning, or they were, they applied for a job and they didn't get one. They had someone they got a recruit stolen away from them by who knows, Charlie Weiss. I mean, all kinds of different things go into that. The athletic directors, they have to be more statesmen or stateswomen. They just have to be in their jobs.
I would agree with you. I was simply commenting on football acumen. Okay. But I would agree with you on that. So Babakwa did, was out there on the media today talking to Dan Patrick, as we alluded to, and a couple of the things that came out of that. The relationship with the ACC has been damaged. I mean, he flat out said it. And what the implications for that might be relative to our alignment with one of the Power Four conferences, or a home for our basketball teams, et cetera. So Bram, why don't you kick that around a little bit? When he says it's been damaged, what do you think he means by that? What do you think the implications of that damage might be?
Well, a couple of things is, first off, I think Cristobal got the memo this morning, because he's now backtracking and saying, it's tough for Notre Dame. It's an ugly business. I feel for them. So all of a sudden now that he's secured his spot, he's got to change of heart. I do think that the situation here is that I don't think Babakwa would have said that if he didn't have something up his sleeve. I just don't think he lets something like that come out unless he's got a threat or some card to play, and he's letting that be known right now. And maybe it's discussions that we've been in with somebody else. I don't know, but I really honestly think he would not have said that unless there is something going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that. I mean, how would you guys feel about landing Olympic sports in the Big East, non-football playing conference, and remaining independent? I mean, that's the first thing that comes to mind for me. Is that what he has up his sleeve? Eddie, what would you think about the Big East as a home for our other sports?
I would hate it. I think that I think our other sports are a perfect fit for the ACC.
They are.
I think the level of competition, I think, we think about it. I mean, what have we been successful in? Lacrosse. That is a mid-Atlantic to, that is an ACC sport.
No question about it. No question about it.
Men's and women's soccer. Again, Florida State's playing, I think, for the national title tonight against Stanford. UNC is always right there. Wake is always right there. BC has a long, sort of pseudo rivalry connection with Notre Dame. They're in the ACC. I'd hate to leave that. Hate to leave that rivalry. I think the ACC is a really, really good fit. I don't know what's going to happen with Florida State and Clemson. I don't know how all that plays out. I think the ACC is, the ACC is the perfect conference, except for their football, is basically a train wreck.
Well, a lot of people, don't love the ACC scheduling agreement. I could care less about ever playing Wake or NC State or UVA or Vatech or whatever, right? But if the scheduling agreement was Miami, Florida State, Clemson, say Georgia Tech, Pitt, okay, that's a pretty standard Notre Dame schedule historically, right? I would be fine if those were the five we played every year, but I'm sure they would have something to say about that. But
I think in this, I don't know. I think in this area, the shifting sands, you just don't know. I mean, BC could go 10-2 next year. Syracuse could have. I mean, when you see
Eddie, you've spent too much time in Boston. I think it's starting to get to your brain a little bit.
Bad example. Syracuse, Vatech. James Franklin could bring that program, into
up to mediocrity.
What's that?
He could bring it up to mediocrity.
come on, you know what I mean?
I'm just teasing you.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that when you sort of cut those sort of, when you kind of go in that exclusivity or that scheduling sort of mode, to me, scheduling's always been a crapshoot. You do the best that you can with the information that you have. You try and schedule schools that have a commitment to the sport. And then you hope 3 or 4 years later, when they come to your place or you go to your place, that it's a meaningful game. It's not an exact science. And again, I understand that that's what the conference people will tell you, like, oh, well, year in and year out, you're going to have a good schedule. Well, that's certainly not true in the Big Ten and the ACC this year.
So, Ed, what I'm hearing you say is you'd like to see us stay put in the ACC as is. Is that a fair recap?
For all sports except football. For football, I could be talked into some other arrangement.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that there is a meaning like a scheduling partnership with some other conference, or what would be another arrangement?
No, I'm just saying that maybe go from 5 to 4 games, or from 5 to 3 or something like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would maybe what he has up his sleeve, Bram, is leverage for more favorable scheduling terms, and maybe it is fewer games, or games against those opponents, or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with you. Something is probably moving behind the scenes.
Yeah, everything is a negotiation, right? I mean, every single move that's being made here, Bavakwa is now that we've been snubbed, he's in a position of power at the moment, because he can say, hey guys, here's the situation now. You just screwed us, and we need to make sure that this doesn't happen again. That's unfair. And I think he's got a point to be made that what happened to us was unfair based on where the committee had us the previous 6 weeks, and the optics of the ACC going hog wild crazy, attacking us the last 2 weeks. I mean, it was a literal campaign of just bashing Notre Dame while they sat there and then didn't respond. They just took the hits and kept quiet, mostly because I think they thought, you know what? It's better for us not to say anything because we're getting in anyway. So let's just move ahead.
Yeah, I think the leverage is maybe in the next iteration of the playoff format. He indicated, he's always been a supporter of 16. That makes sense to me. I've said that. He indicated that, I don't think we're going to get to 16 next year. He thinks that we'll probably be at 12 again next year.
Everybody's indicating it's 12. Yeah.
Right. Because I know the Big Ten put out something that they wanted 24 teams and 4 for each Power 4 conference and all this stuff. So, next year, potentially 12 again, and let's hope that there's some meat to that the memo that says we're in if we're in the top 12. But I agree with you guys. That simply means that we're going to be ranked 13th then if we have 2 losses, because that's what's going to happen, right? And that's they hold the cards. So I question whether we have much leverage in this situation. I don't know.
Well, I found out, Ed will find this fascinating, but Division III, which is a really good playoff format, they do their selections based on computers. Yeah. So there is no committee that gets together that selects. It's based on computers. So somehow they figured it out. How they did it, I don't know, but that's interesting. Right. One last point I just want to make, because I just find this fascinating for wondering what kind of conversations went in. But somebody who is making the argument for Notre Dame, and I assume somebody was, I assume that there were pros and cons, right? For them to move Bama up, somebody had to have said, hey, wait a minute, fellas, Vegas doesn't agree with this at all. Vegas has got Notre Dame better than most of the teams in here. How does that resonate? And I just think it's a discussion point. It is, you're saying it's unbiased. You're hoping that it's unbiased. Well, Vegas is unbiased. There's no bias in Vegas.
Who's saying it's unbiased?
Well, most everybody is hoping that it is, right? People are assuming that we formed a committee so that it doesn't happen. The head of the committee is the AD at Arkansas. I bet you he felt real good about Notre Dame making the playoffs after what we did. So I mean, that's the kind of stuff you're dealing with. I mean, we got his head coach fired. So, this is just, it's human beings that are in the room. And I'm just saying that the idea that there is unbiased opinion going on, you're hoping for that, but the way you hopefully get anywhere near that is in an honest discussion. Is that
Right,
let's have a discussion. And
So a computer-generated selection process might be the way to do that. Again, I think 16 minimizes the impact of biases.
I agree.
Doesn't eliminate it for sure. Here's what eliminates it, and maybe this is the mid-future or distant future. I don't think it's that far in the future, to be honest with you, is more of an NFL-style 32 or 64 team super league in which you have divisions and the division winners are in. Hey, if the Steelers make the playoffs at 8-8, nobody's going to say that's unfair. That's the division. The division winners are in. We all agreed to it, right? And I would be personally, I would be fine with a NFL style, whether it's 32 or 64 teams, and split it into divisions of 8 or whatever the number works out to be, depending on how many teams we're talking about, right? And that's, you play your way in based on your record in your division. What's wrong with that?
I mean, we're heading in that direction, I think.
But in the interim, we're going to come up with another flawed system that allows some biases to decide who gets to play for it. I just think 16 it reduces the damage of that. So, hey, on happier notes, 2 good wins over the weekend for Irish basketball.
Talk about the bowl game.
Oh, man, I forgot. Let's talk about the bowl game. All right, quickly, let's go around.
Well,
I'm okay with not going.
What's that?
I'm okay with the decision of the kids, the team, the leaders of the team to say, no, we don't want to go. I'm totally fine with that. And in fact, the historical precedent of that is 1971, 1975, 1979, and 2009, all years in which we voted no to a bowl game. Anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, I got into it with Coffee about this. He feels the same way that you do. I've softened my view a little bit. I guess I have a process problem with this. It felt really knee-jerk. It felt pretty hasty. It felt emotional. And I just, to me, it's sort of, when you come into a situation like this that's so disappointing and so unfair, and everybody's pissed off and everything's it's real genuine sort of anger and upset. I think you have to take a step back, kind of go back to your core values, sort of go back to what's really important, and decide, okay, what's best for this program and these players, and have a little bit more of a fulsome discussion about it. And I don't see any evidence yet that was done. And the reason that I say that is that this news came out so quickly, and I think young people are resilient. If you would have sort of said, hey, let's give these guys a couple hours and let's talk about it as a group. Let's talk to these captains. These kids, they don't care. I don't think about ESPN politicking, conference affiliations, money, all these things. I mean, they just want to play football, and they want to get better at football, and they want to pursue their dreams and their goals in playing football. And that's Marcus Freeman's sort of secret sauce, that he kind of is able to take all those individual agendas and combine them into a team that lives by the mantra of choosing hard, playing up to a standard, playing for each other, playing for your families and friends, all those sort of things that I would regard as sort of the core tenets of this program. And I just thought that immediately deciding not to play was in conflict with some of those values.
Well, Eddie, I would say that you represented a lot of great thoughts, great points within that, and about the type of program we want and all those things. I agree. The couple things. One, I don't know the timeline of how knee-jerk or quickly or whatever. I have no idea how much deliberation went into it, and so.
Well, not more than 2 hours, right?
Yeah. Well, right, but but 2 hours could be a long time to talk about this. And
Well,
what
I
I
don't
was
think it was
told
a
is
full
that
2
it was a
hours.
unanimous vote. I was told that it was a unanimous vote by the team. And the cap, here's what I like about it. There's very few instances in big time college sports where we put the student athlete first and give them a little more autonomy over this institution that a lot of adults are making a ton of money on. I'm glad the kids are starting to make some money on it. But if the team says, we don't think this is the right choice for us as a team, I have no problem with that.
But I don't think that's necessarily putting the kids first. I think that when you've got an experienced hand like Bavakwa and you've got a head coach like Marcus Freeman, it's their job as leaders and adults in the room to step back and say, what is going to be what's best for these kids intermediate and long term, not just sort of like what kind of statement are we going to make today about this injustice. And what I'm just talking about, in terms of player development, in terms of exposure, in terms of experience, in terms of sort of dealing with adversity, in terms of sort of dealing with unfairness, which life can be unfair. Again, I don't have the answers to those questions. I'm just saying that people jump to this assumption that, okay, well, Marcus Freeman is a player feedback type coach. Well, sure. And I'm not saying dismiss the student athletes' opinions and thoughts and feelings on this out of hand. I'm just saying that, okay, we got screwed. Let's have a vote if we're going to play in a bowl game. I mean, emotions are running high. Of course it was unanimous. I don't know if they did it by hand or whatever. They certainly didn't do it.
There's a ton we don't know. And I just think you're rushing to some conclusions and judgments about the process and the lack of dialogue or guidance by the adults in the room, or like we have no line of sight to any of that. And so I tend to be more, I guess, accepting of here's what they said the process was, and here's what the kids decided.
Yeah,
I'm a little more accepting of that.
Yeah, there's no good outcome to this. I mean, one way or the other. I think there's, another game, another opportunity for a lot of younger players to play, get some experience. All of that sounds good on paper, but you're doing it without Kenny Minchie. He's not going to the game. And who else is in that camp?
Guys.
Yeah, like
and that was what was behind it is they Emil Wagner, both running back, and this is what they said. Like the team we put out there isn't us. It's not a representation of this season and this team, and we don't want to do that.
Like I said, I get that, and that's the kind of context and color that I got today that certainly wasn't available last night. My thinking last night was like, hey, any bowl game would, any non-playoff bowl game would kill to have Notre Dame. If they call you and you say, hey, we're working this out as a group, we'll let you know tomorrow morning. They'll be like, fine, call us when you're ready. Okay.
I disagree with that assessment.
No.
Oh, I think they would, Sully. There's no way they're going to pass on Notre Dame.
Okay, so they wait 24 hours and then everybody else grabs their spot, and then we come back 24 hours later and said, yeah, we voted no.
Hey, I guarantee.
How do you manage that one?
I guarantee you, there's at least a half dozen bowl directors that would take that gamble, because I mean, what is the difference between having 25 and 35,000 people versus 25 and 60? Give me a break. Okay, that's the drawing power of Notre Dame. We've seen it. We've seen it over the years. They go to these half-assed bowl games and they set attendance records. Camping World, they still have the record. Gator, they still have the record. Whatever. Astro Bluebonnet Bowl, they still have the record. I mean, that's the way it works. So
I just can't see. I can't see them saying, "Oh, we'll give you 24 hours." I know we're making up hypotheticals here, but there is a timeline in which these things have to be done, and for good reason. And I think this is a fundamental maybe difference here. I don't think that we simply dictate terms to people like it's 1977 and Moose Krause is working deals. I don't think that's how it works anymore. And I think you have to play within a broader context of other people have rights and interests too. And if we need your answer, we need your answer. And I think that's more realistic than we'll give you 24 hours.
You're making a generalization. I'm talking about this situation. These bowl games are all hanging by a thread anyways.
Yeah,
I
they're
mean,
definitely hanging. I don't
they're
see
on the
their,
verge. They're on the verge of extinction already.
yeah.
If we push them over the edge, good. I hope this move pushes it over the edge.
Well, 16 teams might do that. It might just put these bowls out of business.
Yeah. Yeah.
24 absolutely does. You're done with bowls with 24. 16, I think it's even a hard one to recover from. I don't see how you do it. Not with 16.
All right. Hey, well, Pete Bavaka's got a press conference tomorrow. We're going to come back and we're going to talk more about his comments to the press. We'll also talk about some Fighting Irish basketball. And, I imagine we'll have one or two more things to say about the college football playoffs. So we're going to wrap it up there. For Ed Jordanik and Mike Brammer, I'm Mike Sullivan. We'll see you next time on Dome and Domer.